They were amazing. They were lights to the world. She was an incredible mom. She loved those kids.
I am indescribably angry. I know I can't show that, bury that for a while, and focus on the now, because that anger's not going to bring my child back.
At 1:30 p.m. on February 10th, 2025, a mother in Byron, Wyoming dials 911 with the precision of someone reading a grocery list. "My daughters have been shot." She tells the dispatcher exactly where to find each child: 2 in upstairs cribs, 2 in a downstairs bedroom. When asked to stay on the line, Tranyelle Harshman repeats the same phrase over and over: "It's too late." Then she announces she's going to shoot herself next. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was choreographed. The 911 dispatcher in Bighorn County kept pleading with Tranyelle to stay on the line, but the 32-year-old mother had already made her decision. She'd given precise instructions about where deputies would find her 4 daughters: Braylee, age 9, Olivia, age 7, and 2-year-old twins Brooke and Jordan. She told them she'd be in her upstairs bedroom. Then the line went dead. Deputies arrived at 200 East Shoshone Street within minutes. Inside the modest home, they found exactly what Tranyelle had described. Braylee lay dead in a downstairs bedroom, a single gunshot wound to her head. One of the 2-year-olds was dead in an upstairs crib. The other twin was still breathing but unconscious, also shot in the head. 7-year-old Olivia had a gunshot wound but was somehow still alive. Upstairs, they found Tranyelle unconscious with a self-inflicted gunshot wound to her head. The house was otherwise undisturbed. No signs of struggle, no defensive wounds on any of the children. They'd never seen their mother coming. Paramedics rushed Tranyelle and Olivia to North Bighorn Hospital in nearby Lovell. The surviving twin died shortly after arrival. The wound was too severe. From there, Tranyelle was airlifted to St. Vincent Hospital in Billings, Montana, while Olivia was flown to Primary Children's Hospital in Salt Lake City. By that evening, doctors informed Tranyelle's husband Cliff that his wife was brain dead. They kept her body alive through the night so her organs could be harvested for donation. The next day, February 11th, Tranyelle Harshman was pronounced dead. Her heart, lungs, liver, kidneys, and spleen would go on to save 5 lives. 5 days later, on February 15th, 7-year-old Olivia lost her fight. Her stepmother Caitlin posted on social media that Olivia had gained her angel wings after hanging on just long enough for family to say goodbye. The coroner would later confirm what was already obvious: all 4 girls died from gunshot wounds to the head. But here's what makes this case particularly chilling. When toxicology results came back weeks later, they revealed something that transformed this from a straightforward murder-suicide into something far more complex. Tranyelle had a large amount of ketamine in her system. The anesthetic-turned-antidepressant that was supposed to save her life may have played a role in ending 5 others. Even more disturbing, all 4 children had high levels of diphenhydramine and propranolol in their blood. These are sedating medications, an antihistamine that causes drowsiness, and a beta blocker for anxiety. The children hadn't just been shot while they slept. They'd been drugged first to ensure they wouldn't wake up. The evidence painted a picture of methodical planning that February morning. While her husband Cliff worked at an oil site in California, part of a pattern where his volatile industry job kept him away for days at a time, Tranyelle had the house to herself with the children. Sometime that morning, she gave each child a cocktail of medications. Diphenhydramine, commonly known as Benadryl, would have made them drowsy within 30 minutes. The propranolol would have calmed any anxiety, lowered their heart rates, made them compliant. By early afternoon, all 4 girls would have been sedated, possibly unconscious. This wasn't the first time Cliff's work had taken him away during a crisis. Friends would later note how the oil and gas industry's feast or famine cycle meant he was often gone just when Tranyelle needed support most. But this time, the isolation wasn't just circumstantial. Tranyelle had waited for it. She knew Cliff's schedule. She knew when he'd be furthest away. She knew the children would be alone with her, that no one would interrupt. In a town of 580 people where everyone rubs shoulders with everyone, she'd found perfect solitude for her final act. After the shooting, investigators would discover syringes throughout the house, not hidden or concealed, just scattered in various rooms like any other household item. For Tranyelle, they'd become as ordinary as coffee cups. She'd been self-administering ketamine for weeks, maybe months, trying to escape the crushing weight of postpartum depression that had consumed her since 2022. Cliff would later tell investigators he knew his wife was struggling. He knew about the depression that wouldn't go away after their daughter Brooke was born in February 2022. He knew she'd been racked with guilt when Brooke couldn't nurse properly. He knew that getting pregnant again immediately with Jordan had made everything worse. He knew about what he called a traumatic incident that had triggered PTSD, though he never specified what it was. What he didn't know was that the woman he'd married in July 2020, his high school sweetheart from Wyoming, was dissolving into someone unrecognizable. The ketamine that was supposed to pull her back from the edge may have pushed her over it. Weeks before the shooting, Tranyelle had started a new treatment that represented both cutting-edge psychiatry and desperate measures. Ketamine, originally an anesthetic, had emerged as a breakthrough treatment for severe depression. Unlike traditional antidepressants that take weeks to work, ketamine can lift mood within hours. For someone drowning in postpartum depression, it promised immediate rescue. Tranyelle got her prescription from Sage Psychiatry Services in Cody, Wyoming, 50 miles from her home in Byron. A nurse practitioner named Krista Blau had evaluated her and prescribed ketamine for treatment-resistant depression. By that point, Tranyelle had already tried everything else. Counseling hadn't worked. Vitamins and herbal supplements did nothing. She'd taken prazosin for the nightmares that plagued her sleep, but stopped due to side effects. The ketamine was different. It worked, at least at first. But here's what makes ketamine so complicated as a psychiatric treatment. The same dissociative effects that interrupt depressive thought patterns can also disconnect someone from reality entirely. In controlled clinical settings, patients are monitored for these effects. The dose is carefully calibrated. The setting is safe. Tranyelle was administering the ketamine at home, alone. No medical supervision, no one monitoring her response. Just a desperate mother with syringes and vials, trying to find her way back to herself. By late January 2025, something had shifted. According to the wrongful death lawsuit her mother would later file, Tranyelle had been given large amounts of ketamine at home, which dissociated her from reality and directly led to the shootings. The lawsuit alleged that Sage Psychiatry had been negligent in prescribing such a powerful psychotropic drug without proper monitoring. The scientific literature on ketamine is clear about its risks. While it can provide rapid relief from depression, it can also cause hallucinations, paranoia, and severe dissociation. Users describe feeling separated from their body, watching themselves from outside, losing touch with what's real. In someone already struggling with postpartum depression and PTSD, these effects could be catastrophic. Investigators would later find multiple syringes and vials throughout the Harshman home, suggesting Tranyelle had been self-administering frequently. The toxicology report confirmed she had a large amount in her system when she died. Not a therapeutic dose, not a controlled amount, a large amount. To understand how Tranyelle reached that February morning, you have to go back to 2021. That's when the cascade began. First came the miscarriage, the loss of a wanted pregnancy, the grief that comes with it, the hormonal crash. Then, despite that trauma, she became pregnant again. In February 2022, she gave birth to Brooke, but the baby couldn't nurse properly. For a mother already vulnerable to depression, breastfeeding failure can trigger intense feelings of inadequacy and guilt. Cliff would later describe how his wife was racked with postpartum depression after Brooke's birth. But before she could recover, before her hormones could stabilize, before she could process the trauma, she was pregnant again. Jordan arrived less than a year after her sister. 2 babies under 2, a 9-year-old and 7-year-old from her previous marriage to Quinn Blackmer, a husband whose work in the oil fields meant he was gone for days at a time, a body that had been pregnant or postpartum for 3 straight years, a mind drowning in what Cliff called chemical imbalances in your brain. This is textbook risk factors for postpartum psychosis: closely spaced pregnancies, previous depression, lack of support, chronic sleep deprivation from caring for multiple young children. Yet Tranyelle was never hospitalized, never received inpatient psychiatric care, just outpatient prescriptions and the hope that the next medication would be the one that worked. Cliff emphasized repeatedly that his wife's illness wasn't about willpower or character. "People don't understand how mental illness isn't just a willpower thing," he told reporters. He wanted people to know that the woman who killed their children wasn't the woman he married. She was someone transformed by illness, someone whose brain chemistry had turned against her. There was also PTSD, from what Cliff described only as a traumatic incident outside the family. He never elaborated on what happened, but it added another layer to Tranyelle's psychological burden. Depression, PTSD, hormonal chaos, isolation, each factor amplifying the others in a feedback loop of deterioration. By early 2025, Tranyelle was taking a local job in Powell to help with finances, but it caused friction in the family. The stress of work on top of 4 children and mental illness was unsustainable. Something had to give. Byron, Wyoming sits in the northwest corner of the state, population 580, in Bighorn County. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where the Mormon church anchors the community, where neighbors look out for each other. It's also a place where the nearest psychiatrist might be 100 miles away. Wyoming has the highest suicide rate in the nation. It's not just the isolation or the economic pressures of boom-bust industries like oil and gas. It's the acute shortage of mental health services. In rural counties like Bighorn, there might be one mental health provider for thousands of square miles. For Tranyelle, getting help meant driving 50 miles to Cody to see a nurse practitioner, not a psychiatrist, not a specialist in postpartum disorders, a nurse practitioner doing her best to serve a vast area with limited resources. This is the reality of mental health care in rural America. Telepsychiatry helps, but it can't replace in-person monitoring for high-risk patients. Medications get prescribed, but follow-up is sporadic. Warning signs get missed not through negligence but through sheer distance and scarcity. Governor Mark Gordon would later use this tragedy to call for doubling down on mental health resources in Wyoming. This incident underscores the need for mental health support in small communities, he said. But for the Harshman family, that recognition came too late. The structural barriers were enormous. Even if Tranyelle had recognized she needed intensive help, where would she go? The nearest psychiatric hospital was hours away. Who would watch her 4 children? How would they afford it with Cliff's irregular oil field income? These aren't excuses for what happened. They're the context that made a preventable tragedy feel inevitable. In a state where asking for mental health help already carries stigma, where resources are scarce, where distances are vast, Tranyelle fell through every crack in the system. Within hours of the shooting, while Olivia fought for life in Salt Lake City and Tranyelle lay brain-dead in Billings, something remarkable happened in Byron. The community that had missed all the warning signs suddenly mobilized. 2 GoFundMe campaigns raised over $100,000 within days. Churches across northern Wyoming organized prayer vigils. Neighbors who'd been blindsided by the violence came together to support both families, the Harshmans and the Blackmers. Most remarkably, Cliff Harshman refused to demonize his wife. While his daughters' bodies were still being autopsied, while planning 4 funerals, while processing unimaginable grief, he told anyone who would listen, "My wife was not a monster." He was angry, he admitted. "I'm so angry with her." But he understood that the woman who killed their children wasn't the woman he'd married in Powell 5 years earlier. She was someone transformed by illness, someone who'd been failed by inadequate treatment and absent support systems. This wasn't denial or excuse-making. Cliff wanted people to understand that mental illness could transform anyone, that Tranyelle had been sweet, loving, and funny, that her children had been her main focus in life. He wanted her remembered as a warning about postpartum depression, not as a cautionary tale about evil mothers. The organ donation added another layer of complexity. Tranyelle's organs saved 5 lives. Her heart, lungs, liver, kidneys, and spleen went to recipients who'd been waiting for transplants. It's a detail that resists simple narratives about good and evil. A woman who took 4 innocent lives also saved 5 others. By September 2025, Tranyelle's mother, Rhonda Coplin, had filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Sage Psychiatry and nurse practitioner Krista Blau. The suit alleged that prescribing ketamine for home use without proper monitoring was negligent, that it had dissociated her from reality and directly led to the shootings. This legal action represents something new in psychiatric malpractice. holding providers accountable not just for patient suicide but for violence against others. If successful, it could transform how experimental treatments like ketamine are prescribed, especially in rural areas with limited oversight. The Mormon community in Byron and Powell held joint memorial services for Tranyelle, Brooke, and Jordan on February 22nd. Braley and Olivia's services were held separately in Utah. The same churches that had failed to recognize Tranyelle's crisis now had to reckon with their role in preventing future tragedies. Friends who'd described Tranyelle as devoted to her children had to reconcile that image with the woman who'd methodically drugged and shot them. The husband who'd known about her severe depression but left for work anyway had to live with his choices. The medical system that had prescribed powerful psychotropic drugs without adequate monitoring faced legal consequences. Stop right here. This moment. This is what we need to understand about maternal filicide. It's not about monsters or evil mothers. It's about systems that fail, treatments that backfire, and communities that look away until it's too late. Cliff Harshman continues to advocate for mental health awareness. He wants people to recognize the signs he missed, to understand that postpartum depression can be fatal, to push for better resources in rural areas. He's turned his grief into a mission. But 4 little girls are still dead. Braley, who was 9, Olivia, who was 7, Brooke and Jordan, barely 2 years old. They were sedated so they wouldn't suffer, shot by the mother who was supposed to protect them, killed by a convergence of illness, isolation, and a medication that was supposed to help. The Harshman case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about motherhood, mental illness, and medical treatment. It asks whether ketamine's promise as a rapid antidepressant is worth its risks when prescribed without proper oversight. It questions whether rural communities can ever adequately support severe mental illness. It challenges us to see both victim and perpetrator in a woman who killed her children while her brain was flooded with a dissociative anesthetic. There are no easy answers here, just a small Wyoming town trying to heal, a husband defending his dead wife's memory, and a legal system grappling with whether prescribing hope in a syringe makes you responsible when that hope turns to horror.